Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Stories of Light. I am absolutely ecstatic that you are here. And I'm just so overjoyed to really bring this program to you because the theme for 2023 is magical stories from around the world. And, this is just something that I really felt called to bring through. I just feel like there is so much there's like so much division in the world. And really, like, I feel like we are at a point in our evolution, in our consciousness, where it's almost like if we can see the magic in each other, if we can see the beauty in each other. I just really feel like stories are that way. They are the vehicle for us to really come into like this deep appreciation of oneness. And I wanted to start this magical 2023 by really bringing in some of the great and magical lessons of China. Because China is very, very dear to my heart. And for those of you who don't know, I might have mentioned this. I lived in this place called Chufu. So I lived in Chufu from 2012 to 2013. I taught English in China. And that was probably one of the most profound experiences of my entire life. And I can just say, like, what called me, I don't even know what called me. I remember very, very vividly. I was, like 20, like 21, 22 years old. I saw a sign that just said, like, do you want to teach English in China? And it was funny because I did like a double take. And I remember like, I just instantly had that deep knowing in my heart, which was yes. And it was not something that I'd ever thought of until that very moment. And so that's why it was just so powerful that, like, I answered the call and I didn't like, there are certain places that like my whole life had whispered in my ear. Until that moment, China wasn't one of them, but it was just this knowing. It was this knowing that like there was something that I was meant to experience. There was some good that I was meant to bring through to the world by teaching English in China. And so I spent a year in Shufu, and it was amazing because besides like my incredible, extraordinary students, I literally was in the birthplace of Confucius for a year. And so there are a lot of people like you think about China, you think of like Shanghai or Beijing, like you think of those bigger places, but like for a lot of people, like it's almost like a lifelong pilgrimage. Like most people in China make it at some point in their life to Chufu, just because of just the vast wealth of wisdom that Confucius brought to the world. And the way that like he really elevated the culture, the thought forms, like just like Confucius is someone very, very deeply honored still to this day in China. I just wanted to read a tiny little story. I have a couple, magical Chinese legends for you today. So the story I'm reading, it's from this beautiful book. Um, and this is just a very quick story about the morning and evening star. And one thing I want to say, I feel like I make this a caveat for everything I do, whether I'm like talking about Irish legends or Welsh legends, is that I probably do not pronounce things correctly. And so for anyone who like, if it's your culture and I'm mispronouncing it, I truly apologize. I want to, just, I want you to know that I'm coming with the utmost love whenever I tell a story, even if it's from a place where I don't quite know how to pronounce it. But anyway, so I want to just read this very, very quick story about the morning and evening star. And here it says the ancient Chinese were great astronomers. And recent archaeological work has actually, uncovered an observatory dating back to the third millennium BC. So this is one of the old stories. So once upon a time, there were two stars, sons of the golden king of the heavens. One was Taishan and the other Shen. One day they quarreled, and Taishan struck Shen a terrible blow. Thereupon, both stars made a vow they would never again look upon each other. So Taishan only appears in the evening, and Shan only appears in the morning. And not until Taishan has disappeared is Shan again to be seen. And that is why people say, when two brothers do not live peaceably with one another, they are like Taishan, Shan. And I love this because, I mean, one, I love all stories that have like a nature element where like nature becomes embodied. But I feel like that was part of my desire for today, was shifting out of the division, like shifting, like, because we've seen this story since like the dawn of time. We look at stories like Cain and Abel, where it's like we have two brothers, two people of the same blood, who even they find division. And I really feel like we are being called in this moment to just step into oneness, to step, to step into a sense of unity. And so that's part of, why I wanted to share, some of my experiences, because when I went to China, I definitely felt, I was in a brand new world. Like it was a place though of such great, there's a timeless wisdom. That's the phrase that's coming through. There was like a timeless wisdom that I felt like I was blessed. I was blessed to receive by being there. And I can say that, like, one of the great things that I learned being in Shufu, the birthplace of Confucius, the word learning, it was just the value, because like Confucius, I'm going to read some of the Analects of Confucius, but Confucius was a big proponent, like education was everything to him. Everything was about learning, was about coming into just like, it was coming into integrity. So it was like to be, you were becoming like educated in the way of books, but also educated in the way of integrity. And so I feel like that's really like the legacy that Confucius, like inspires in us even today. And I just want to share, like, I'm going to share a couple, like the Analects of Confucius are vast, but I'm just going to share a couple, of his teaching, just so you can kind of feel into the energy of them, and just like, the energy of these teachings, and how they resonate for you even today, thousands of years later. So here is one. This is in the first book of the Analects. These are all written by Confucius. The master said, to study and at due times practice what one has studied, is this not pleasure? When friends come from distant places, is this not joy? And this is a very beautiful like sentiment that I really experience a lot in China, and especially with Confucius. It's like, when friends come from distant places, is this not joy? And there's really a great cherishing of friendship, of like that loyalty, between people. And so Confucius is really honoring like the nobility of the human spirit. I feel that very, very strongly whenever I read his work. And so then this is another analect. So Master Zhang said, each day I examine myself upon 3 points. In planning for others, have I been loyal? In company with friends, have I been trustworthy? And have I practiced what has been passed on to me? So again, you're really seeing here this couple things here. Have I been loyal? So we're again talking about the nobility of the human spirit. And in company with friends, have I been trustworthy? Again, this emphasis on friendship. And I feel like that's very important because, again, like when we're looking at, different cultures, different nations, we're talking about coming into friendship. And so like that friendship, like, we experience friendship in our daily lives, the people who are close to us. But really it's about like, it's this energy of friendship, of reciprocation and trust. And so, this is one of the great teachings of Confucius himself. And then I love this last point, and have I practiced what has been passed on to me? Because again, like we're talking about that principle of education, and this is one of Confucius's core values. And there's another analect a little bit later. This is 1.8. The Analects are, it's very beautiful the way that they're laid out because there are several books. And so this is all from the first book. And so here it says, if you study, you will not be crude. Take loyalty and trustworthiness as the pivot, and have no friends who are not like yourself in this. So again, I want to just like draw your attention. It's like the same things that we're learning. Take loyalty and trustworthiness as the pivot. So it's like put those above all else, and have no friends who are not like yourself in this. So it's really this kind of message to be discerning. And I really do believe that we are consciously creating, our heaven on earth by the things that we get to choose our reality. We get to choose the people we want to be part of our world. And it's really, I feel like we are called in this moment to create our lives in great benevolence. If that is our desire. For me, that's something that I have been doing more and more, is like every day I wake up is how can I create my life from a place of true benevolence? How can I really create my life in a way that like everything is harmony? And that's a very, very Chinese teaching, is really about like creating that harmony, harmony within, harmony without. But so, Confucius doesn't focus as much on harmony, but like, I just think it's really interesting when you start sitting with these concepts, these very, very ancient teachings, and just seeing how they land in your body, in your consciousness. And there's like one more little thing here for the last little analect that I read. So take loyalty and trustworthiness as the pivot, and have no friends who are not like yourself in this. If you err, do not be afraid to correct yourself. So I love this because there's also like an implicit, there's like a forgiveness, and there's also that energy of always learning, of always recognizing that you can shift. Like, if you fall down in a moment, that you can accept that, correct yourself, and stand up again. So again, like, I feel like this is a principle that Confucius has. It's kind of related to like, the way we lead our lives, coming from that place of integrity, but it's also just any life lesson, anything that we are learning in life, where we really just need to pick ourselves back up again, to recognize that life is this one great big learning experience, and to just see it as that. It's almost like we're in this like divine school, and there are many, many lessons, and we can always pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off if we need to learn the lesson again. So there's just a couple more that I will read, because I know that I don't want this to be like we're in school, but that is very Confucius, actually, is that feeling of being in school. And so here, I'm only going to read 3 more, but so here's the last one from the first book. The master said, do not be concerned that no one recognizes your merits. Be concerned that you may not recognize others. And I love that, because it's that invitation to see the merit in other people, to see the beauty in others. We spend so much time like, my God, nobody recognizes, my value, or nobody recognizes like, there's that kind of feeling where all the emphasis is placed on us being recognized. But really, are we recognizing the beauty, the greatness in others? Are we recognizing their merits? And so I feel like that's just a beautiful little thing to think about. And there are just a couple more that I wanted to share. And so these are just 2 more from the second book of the Analects. And so here Confucius has, the master said, when one rules by means of virtue, it is like the North Star. It dwells in its place, and the other stars pay reverence to it. So I love this because I feel like this is speaking to the natural. It's like the harmony that is, integral to the universe. So when one rules by means of virtue, It is like the North Star. It dwells in its place, and the other stars pay reverence to it. So it's that kind of idea that like when one is coming from a place of virtue, it's one of those things that everything in the universe recognizes that star. And the people will come, and again, the other stars will pay reference. So like I just feel like that is just very, very beautiful. And again, there's this emphasis on virtue, and really living your life from that place of great virtue of the heart, and setting, when you really come from that place of great virtue, seeing how everything in the universe comes into harmony. And then you really become that North Star. You become that focal point for others when they're looking for peace, when they are looking for harmony, when they're looking for guidance and direction. I also love the North Star in the sense that like when we're looking to the sky, like that is the compass. We're looking to that North Star to guide us. And so it's really here, it's also like this teaching, this lesson to be guided by virtue, for us to be guided by virtue, that the other people in our lives, the other stars, will in turn be guided by that same principle. So that one I just love so much. I think that's so beautiful. And it's the last one I will share. The master said, "Shall I teach you about knowledge?" And then he says, "You." And then, so this knowledge, he says, is to know when you know something and to know when you don't. That's knowledge. And I just think that's, again, there's something about Confucius, like there's just so much, the wisdom, it's so simple and yet so palpable. And so I love that, knowledge is, to know when you know something and to know when you don't. And so that's just a little glimpse into the Analects of Confucius. When I was there, I made myself, read them, and I don't know, like just kind of absorb them, because there are a lot of the Analects. Like I picked ones to share with you that resonated with me, because there are a lot of Analects that are all like honor your parents, that are really more about like that's a big emphasis also in traditional Chinese cultures, really honoring leaders, parents. Like there's a lot in there about just like honoring those around you. But I feel the ones that I felt guided to bring through were more about the education and the virtue. Like I feel like those are the big things that I've taken from Confucius. And I also felt while I was there, it really brought to me like this big question of like what is true education. And it's so funny because I came in, it was almost like my Dead Poet Society debut. Like I came in to teach, I was teaching writing. And so I taught it was at Chufu Normal University. And I had 3 writing classes, and they were juniors. So all of my students they had literally been studying English since they were in 2nd or 3rd grade. So the students that I had were very vocal. They had a lot of skills already under their belt, but they needed more help with writing. And so I remember I had, my degree was in creative writing. So I was like, okay, I'm going to have you guys, I started out like, let's write a poem. And my students could not do this. They were so like, this was so hard for them. And I didn't understand what was going on, because I was really coming from that Western model of education. And also, for me, writing was like breathing. And, I recognized, okay, some of you might have a challenge, but I didn't expect almost everyone to really be stuck. And I asked a couple of the students, like, what's going on? And I remember like one of my students, this shocked me. Like she said that at one point when she was in a high school, that she had written a poem. And she showed it to her high school teacher, and her high school teacher had said, like, burn this, like, don't show this to anyone. And I almost feel like I'm not supposed to be talking about this, but I am. And so it's interesting, like that there was an emphasis, like not as much on individual expression, and poetry and writing really was something that was, how do I say, like in America, I took that kind of education for granted, that I would be able to, to write a poem and share my feelings, and to like be seen in my individual expression, for someone to hear what I had written, whether they liked it or not, like, and I could just say like, this is, either like, this is a poem that I wrote about myself, or this is a poem I wrote about something beautiful I experienced in nature. I mean, I feel like, writing literally is like this fundamental expression of life, but chiefly because everyone who is writing, you're coming with your own unique voice, your own unique presence. And I saw that my students, many of them had never been asked to write a poem before. They'd never been asked to write a poem before. And the ones who had wanted to write a poem had experiences like the one that I mentioned, where they were told, like, don't show this to anybody, hide this. And it was like this kind of deep feeling, like I knew that I was there not to, I didn't want to challenge the culture, but I wanted to show the people like that, that I felt the universe had put me there, and that like I wanted to show them the beauty of language, like the what poetry could be, what writing could be, and then they could take it or leave it. And so it was interesting. So there I was, in the place where, like, Confucius himself, like I said, was born, like, his legacy was there. And it was this great question of education. Like I felt like almost like I was called there to help people, kind of to help that expansion, of the mind, of what was possible through language. And so, I mean, I honestly learned so much from my students too. Like it wasn't a one-way street, believe me. I feel like they probably taught me more than I taught them. But like I just learned so much. And I wanted to, I know I've gotten a little bit off track, but I wanted to just, I'm going to share another beautiful story, ancient, because the way that I fell in love with China when I was there. And I fell in love with it because, I mean, I loved like of course, like I was, I was there in 2012, 2013. So, I was there, in a modern moment, but like a place like China is like millenniums. Like it's got such an ancient, such a very, very rich history. And so I wanted to really just, when I was there, I was just immersing myself in all of the ancient legends. And so there's one I want to share with you today. Wanted to actually read from this book that was, I believe, recently published. It was called Beneath the Moon. So this is The Boy and the Pearl Dragon. And don't worry, this isn't that long, but I want you to just like, again, to see how this lands for you. Okay. So dragons in China are very powerful. They are symbols of strength, mystery, and good fortune. They can make themselves as small as silkworms or as large as the universe. They can live in heaven or deep in the ocean and control typhoons, tidal waves, floods, and rain. They can travel far distances, and some have even been known to favor men in mountain retreats. They are often known to carry a pearl that contains much of their magical power. Dragons are so magnificent. There is even an expression in Chinese that means to hope one's son will become a dragon. And this, leads into a beautiful story. There was once a little boy who lived in a small village that was starving from years of drought. Nothing would grow, and even the wild animals were suffering. When the boy saw a fat rabbit, he followed it to its home. There he found a small patch of greenery that was flourishing, which, when he dug it up, was growing around a giant pearl. Thinking he could sell the pearl for food, the little boy and his mother put it in a rice jar that night and slept peacefully. In the morning, they found the once empty rice jar overflowing. The same miracle repeated itself again with the rice jar, an oil jar, and then with a box of money. The boy and his mother realized the pearl was magic and were able to stop worrying about food. But their newfound luck was noticed by greedy men who smashed the boy's house in order to find whatever he had. The little boy grew terrified and in his fear swallowed the pearl whole. He began to feel unbelievably thirsty. He drank a whole jug of water, then a whole well, when he plunged himself finally into the river. He emerged as a giant dragon, swishing his tail back and forth and frightening the men away. The boy turned dragon looked at his mother, and she at him, and they knew he could never be changed back. So instead, he became the protector of the river, and his mother visited him often. So I just wanted to share that with you. The writer here, her name is Yoshitani. So she also has a tarot deck that was actually the first. That was what I originally found her. Someone got me this tarot deck, which was literally stories from around the world, and it kind of blew my mind because I'd already had the download for stories of light, magical stories from around the world. And then when I was gifted this beautiful tarot deck, which each card in the deck has a different magical story, I knew the universe was giving me that confirmation that yes, I was supposed to really bring through all the magic from all different parts of the world, from many different cultures. But so I love that story because, I feel like it's that line, like, a boy may one day become a dragon. And that's the whole thing is when we look at these ancient legends, we see just how close we are to magic, how close we are to the natural world and the elements. And, I just feel like there's something deep in our hearts that gets activated when we hear legends of dragons. When we think about that, because all of us at any moment in time, we can become the dragon, and I feel like, we can call upon dragons like for aid, for assistance, but also it's like us becoming that embodiment of the dragon. And the dragon is not just, fierce, but the dragon is wise. And so I just wanted to share that story with you. And I'm trying to just think of any other things that I feel called to share today. I just want to share the major things that I learned, when I was in China. And I really just felt like when I was there, I felt spirit in everything. And it was interesting because I was there in a time where like spirit wasn't celebrated the way that it would have been, a few hundred, even a few thousand years ago. And yet I felt that it was there, undeniable, unmistakable. And I love telling the story. So one of the most profound experiences I had was actually when I was toward the very, very end of my time in China. I climbed a mountain called Taishan. Is Mount Tai is the English, but it was the mountain that the emperors had to climb to become emperor. And it was funny, all year when I was there, everyone was like, "Have you climbed Taishan? Have you climbed Taishan?" And it was, I know that it's like, the universe, like spirit, like had me wait till the very end. And it's so funny because it's like one of those experiences. It's like an initiation. And so ancient Chinese mountains, it's like there are stairs all the way at the top. So it's not like a kind of a mountain where there's just like, dirt and regular terrain. It's like it is epic. It is stairs all the way up to the pinnacle of the mountain. And I remember, I was with, it was like 3 other people, when we were, ascending to the top of the mountain. And it's like, and you're like dying. It's long. And I remember thinking like, we must be there. We must be there. And there is a sign, it's and of course it's like, it's in Chinese, so you have to like translate. But literally it said, you are now halfway to the halfway point. I mean, like, what? But I mean, and then I remember laughing to myself, well, that's what happens when it's like the mountain the emperors had to climb to become emperor. And anyway, so we continued, got to the top of the mountain, and there's a really cool thing. So one thing that I'm always talking about is I love Chinese medicine is like, a very, very important part of my life, even to this day. And it really started 10 years ago when I lived there. And I remember I always tell this story about the reishi mushroom. So we were climbing Taishan, and there was a man there, and it was like a blanket laid out, and there were fresh mushrooms that he had just picked from the forest that morning. And so one of the people I was with was like, my God, that's the reishi mushroom. And so it's funny because once upon a time, reishi was so rare in ancient China. I mean, today it's still known as the mushroom of immortality, but it's one of those things that, in ancient China, if you found the reishi mushroom, it's actually in China, it's like lingzhi. It's reishi is actually, that's the Japanese word. That's the one that most people in the West call it reishi, but the Chinese is like lingzhi. And anyway, so if you found that mushroom, you literally had to eat it right then and there on the spot and tell no one, not your spouse, not your children. It was just like, it was a thing, because you were literally, if you found that mushroom, supposed to give it to the emperor. So I think it was like in the 1980s, the Japanese found a way of producing reishi for the masses. But, in olden times, it literally was only, it was only really growing in these old forests, usually by these great spiritual mountains. So there is a lot of like spiritual energy that's like from the mountains that really seeped into the mushrooms themselves. And I could go on all day about reishi, but I remember that we got you, and usually reishi is very expensive, but we literally got it like that day. We got this very, very good deal for the reishi, which had been picked probably like an hour beforehand. And we climbed to the top of the mountain, we made it, and I remember it was just this feeling of like homecoming for me. And it was so interesting because it was really foggy. And there was a part like, right, very close to the top, where it's just like mists. It's just like this, because after a certain point, you're in the clouds. Like it's not just mist. It's like you're in the clouds, and there's like a little plaque where it's like you can go, stand, kind of, right, like you're kind of at the edge, you're protected, but you're at the edge. And it's this moment where you kind of lean in. You lean in, and I think this part of the mountain is like, it's like called like the Dragon's Pass, something like that, because as you're leaning in, you're actually, seeing what it would be like to be that dragon in mid-flight. So again, like we're seeing the dragons, but also, so I got to the top of the mountain, it's covered with mist, and most people do not make it to the top. This was hours to get there. And as luck would have it, right when we got to the top of the mountain, it started pouring rain. Started pouring rain. And we had, a bus to catch. So we had to like, book it down the mountain. But it was amazing because the people who like, most of the people just like scattered, and they didn't feel the same urgency that me, and as I said, there was 3 other people I was with. We had to get back down, to make our bus back home to Chufu. And so I remember literally going down the mountain. The way up, there's so many people in China. So the way up, was really populated, and the way down, it was like nothing else I'd ever experienced. To this day in my life, I have goosebumps, because it was just, the rain was pouring down, And, at one point, like, my companions like went ahead of me. So it was just me by myself on this mountain with not another soul in sight. And it was just me in the rain, in like the peace and serenity and dare I say, the magic of this mountain. And it was so interesting because at one point, I don't know why my companions went ahead and left me. Like I was the only girl. But so they just kind of went ahead. They were faster than me. That's why. And so I remember at one point I had this feeling of like, I don't think I'm making it down this mountain. I just felt that. And I was, really in this moment of peace and transcendence, but I just was like, I don't think I'm making it down this mountain. It's too far. And then this was really before I had more of the spiritual awakening that I would have later in my life. I literally just felt lit from within. I felt this light. It was like it started like in my heart, and it poured like through my very being, through all of my heart, and like through everything. And it was just this force that was like, you will get down the mountain. It was this force, this loving, protective energy that was so sacred that in that moment, I just felt so seen and so held by the spirit of the mountain, by the spirit of the mountain, by the emperors who had come before, by my guides, my team, by the universe itself. And so I just thought it was so interesting that, in China, like a lot of the stuff we read today, there's not as much emphasis on the spirituality, on the magic, but I just wanted to share like this very like active experience I had of the land as a way of sharing that the magic is still there. It's there in the land. It's there in the stories. And another funny thing, because I did get to the bottom of the mountain, I literally attribute me getting down to this, to this beautiful divine light, to this force that gave me the strength to keep going. It's serious business, like going up and down the mountain of the emperors. So I remember like, we got to the bottom, all together, we were like soaked through. And there were three of us. We were all going back to the same place. And so we got home and immediately brewed the reishi. It was like, we need to brew this now. And because we had gone down the mountain in the pouring rain for hours. It wasn't a quick descent. It was hours in the rain. And talk about like baptism. It was like this, but it was, oh, it was heavenly. It was freezing and heavenly at the same time. But so we had the reishi mushroom tea. Like I remember this was right before I was leaving China to go back to America, and one of the teachers who was brewing the tea, who had been on the mountain with me, just was like, just drink as much of this as you can, just keep going, and it was funny because I mentioned there that I was in a group of 4, and the fourth person was actually one of my students. And so he was really our guide. He was the one that like got us there, helped us like read all the signs. And he was the only one of us who did not have the reishi mushroom tea. The 3 of us who did, all of us were like the picture of perfect health. We were all great. He was like, this was, a young, like, this guy was like, I think he was a basketball player. He was like super young, super strong. But the last time I saw him, he was like sick as a dog from our hike up the mountain, from being in the rain. And it just always struck me, and the magic of like, I'm again like the reishi mushroom, just because, like I said, the only difference, we all had the exact same journey, but like the 3 of us who didn't get sick, were the ones that, we'd had this like, special reishi tea, like the mushroom from this great spiritual holy mountain. And, my student who got sick, he actually, I mean, it's funny, we at the very end, when he was sick, we gave him the last of the tea. So I'm hoping that he recovered and got better. But I love that story in the sense that it shows the power of the mushroom, and just like it gives you a sense of wonder. It gives you a sense of all that really is possible. So I just wanted to share that. That's one of my favorite stories of the land. But I just remember that story was so important for me because that was one of my last days in China before I left. And so that was 2013. And I know I left China, came back to America, but it was like 3 days after that. And I share that because when I said goodbye to my students, and I don't know if I said this, but when I was there, I was 23, and a lot of my students were like 21. Like we were very, very close in age. And I remember saying goodbye to them and thinking, and not even just thinking, but telling them, oh, it's okay. I will be back. Next year, like I'll be back and I'm going to see you. And I remember like the way that they looked at me because they'd had other foreign teachers before. And I think they knew, and like they knew how rare it was for someone to return. And I, to this day, it's been 10 years and I have not yet returned to China. And so part of like my desire to create this is because my whole life changed. My life totally changed when it wasn't just that I lived in another country for a year. I just saw the beauty of what happens when different cultures come together to understand each other and to learn from each other. That's what, like, it was that cooperation. And I really feel like that was the true spirit of Confucius. Like I said, it's not just friendship. It's not just friendship, like from like, someone like in your immediate circle, but the friendship between cultures, the friendship between nations, and really honoring, like having a great honor, reverence, love and respect. That is one of the great teachings of Confucius, and a way of creating harmony, not just in our own lives, but harmony throughout the world. And so that is like one of the big things I took away from my time there. And I just wanted to impart that to you. Just so that like, you could, see in real time the power, and the value of what happens when we open up. We open up to teachings from around the world, whether we fully agree with them or we don't. And in today's world, we're so when we have a belief or we have an idea, we want everyone to, like they have to see it our way. And there's something very powerful about just that openness to, even if you don't resonate with the idea, staying open to what it might have to teach you. So this is just the beginning. This is just the first taste of Stories of Light. I hope that you are enjoying these stories. And my intention is really just to sprinkle in magic from all over the world, to sprinkle in that magic and just really, open your heart, to, I feel like there have been so many stories, all around the world in so many different cultures. And I feel like when you hear each of those stories, it is a moment where something magical activates inside you. It is like a little pearl. It's like, I feel like each of these stories, there's a little pearl and they light something up inside of us. And that's why if we take our time, we might, go through our lives and not think anything is magical. But, from my earliest days, when I was a kid, I remember I would just be mesmerized when I would sit in a story circle, and the teacher would read one of these tales. I could just feel something inside me just expand and just like shift into this, just like this great joy, this great bliss of being. And so that's my intention with these little mini stories for Stories of Light, is to help you just like for one moment of the day, shift into that pearl of magic, that pearl that is within. And you can see that if you want as the dragon pearl, or it's just, it's just this pearl that you can carry with you. And the more that you listen to these stories, I just feel like, the bigger that pearl will grow. So that's just, the the first episode, and I am so excited to see you next time. Over the next year, my intention, my promise to you is that there will be stories from all over. There will be stories from India, from Persia, from let's see, like from Spain, France, Norway. There is no place that does not have a voice. And, that really is my intention with this beautiful year 2023, really bringing in the magic of legends, the magic of stories from all four corners of the globe. And I hope that, over this year that these stories inspire you. I hope that they motivate you. I hope that you find gems, like little pearls of wisdom and insight that make a difference for you in your life.